They laughed when the old man asked to borrow a stranger's phone, but no one imagined that one simple call would expose a lie that had stolen 6 years from a family and leave an entire bus station too stunned to speak. Rain swept sideways across the downtown bus terminal, turning the concrete into a sheet of silver that reflected flashing brake lights and tired faces rushing toward the last evening routes. Umbrellas bumped into one another, shoes splashed through shallow puddles, and the loudspeaker crackled with another delayed departure. In the middle of all that motion stood an elderly black man wearing a faded brown coat that looked too thin for the weather. He held a tiny piece of folded paper so carefully that it almost seemed more valuable than his own life. His hands trembled as he approached a woman waiting near gate 7. "Excuse me, ma'am, could I borrow your phone for 1 minute?" She didn't even look at the paper. She stepped back, clutched her purse tighter, and shook her head. "Nice try." The old man nodded politely, whispered, "Thank you anyway," and walked toward the next person. A young businessman avoided eye contact completely. A teenager pretended to be absorbed in his headphones. Finally, the old man reached the customer service counter. "Please," he said softly, "I only need one phone call." The woman behind the counter barely lifted her eyes from the computer. "We don't lend personal devices, sir. Could you call for me? Company policy. It's important. You'll need to leave the line if you aren't buying a ticket." A few people sighed impatiently behind him. Someone muttered, "He's probably running another scam." A white security officer noticed the growing crowd and walked over with the weary expression of a man who believed he had already seen every trick in the city. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to move along." The old man looked down at the folded paper, carefully smoothing one corner where the rain had started to blur the ink. "Please," he whispered. "She may still remember my voice." A few passengers exchanged amused looks. One woman quietly raised her phone and started recording. Nobody stepped forward. Nobody except Marcus Reed. Marcus had just finished dropping off another delivery across the street. His reflective jacket was soaked through, and the insulated delivery bag hanging from his shoulder suddenly felt twice as heavy. His phone buzzed with another notification reminding him he still had one final package to confirm before the end of his shift. 11% battery remained. Inside his aging sedan parked near the curb, his 8-year-old daughter, Nia, sat patiently coloring in a notebook while raindrops slid across the windshield. Marcus watched the old man for several silent seconds. He noticed something the others never bothered to see. The old man's eyes weren't searching for money. They weren't searching for sympathy. They were searching for courage. Marcus walked over slowly. "Sir," he said, "who are you trying to call?" The old man unfolded the paper with both hands as though opening something sacred. The paper had nearly dissolved from years of folding and unfolding. A phone number was written in faded blue ink. Above it appeared one name, Elena. Beside the name was a tiny drawing of a swallow with its wings stretched wide. Marcus looked at the old man. "Do you know this number by heart?" The old man smiled sadly. "I used to." Marcus glanced toward his car where Nia looked back through the fogged-up window. Then he checked the battery on his phone again. 11%. One delivery still waiting. One late confirmation could cost him the rest of the night's earnings. Behind him someone laughed. "Don't do it, buddy. You'll never see that phone again." Another voice joined in. "Some people never learn." Marcus ignored both of them. He wiped the rain from his screen with his sleeve, stepped beneath the station awning, and carefully entered each digit himself because the old man's fingers were shaking too badly to press the keys. Then he turned on speaker mode. "Here," Marcus said quietly. "Take your time." The line rang once, twice, 3 times. The entire station seemed to breathe around that tiny sound. Then a calm woman's voice answered. "This is Elena Vale. Who's calling?" The old man's lips trembled. He closed his eyes before speaking only 2 words. "It's Arthur." There was absolute silence on the other end. 1 heartbeat, 2, 3. Then the woman whispered with a voice that sounded as though it had forgotten how to breathe. "My father died 6 years ago." The rain seemed even louder after those words, as if the entire station had forgotten how to breathe. Arthur did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He simply held the phone with both shaking hands and closed his eyes for a moment. "Elena," he whispered, "if you are really there, I have been trying to find my way back to you." No one around him knew what to believe anymore. The woman recording lowered her phone just enough to study his face. The security officer folded his arms, convinced he was watching another heartbreaking performance from a confused old man. Marcus remained exactly where he was. He neither defended Arthur nor accused him of lying. He simply waited. Truth, he had learned long ago, usually needed less noise than people imagined. The woman on the phone finally spoke again. Her voice was calm, careful, almost painfully controlled. "Who gave you this phone?" Arthur looked toward Marcus. "A kind man. What is his name?" Marcus leaned closer. "Marcus Reed." "Mr. Reed," she said, "please do not leave." He answered honestly, "I still have one delivery left tonight. Please stay anyway." Before Marcus could respond, the security officer stepped forward. "Sir, I need that phone back. This situation is causing a disturbance." Marcus looked directly at him. "He is still on a call. We have procedures." "Then let him finish before we follow them." A few impatient passengers rolled their eyes. Someone muttered that Marcus was going to lose his job over a stranger. Another laughed that only a fool would believe stories like this. Marcus ignored every word. He had spent years delivering packages to neighborhoods where people judged him before he ever knocked on the door. He recognized the sound of quick conclusions. They always arrived before facts. On the other end of the call, Elena asked another question. "Arthur, when I was little, what did you draw beside my name every time you wrote me a letter?" Arthur slowly unfolded the worn piece of paper. His fingers rested on the tiny faded bird. "A swallow," he answered without hesitation. "Because you told me they always find their way home." There was another long silence. Marcus heard a slow breath through the speaker. It sounded less like disbelief now and more like someone trying not to remember something that hurt. "Who told you that?" Elena asked quietly. Arthur gave a tired smile. "You did. During a thunderstorm. You were 8. Marcus watched the old man's face. Nothing about him suggested someone inventing details. There was confusion in his eyes, exhaustion in his posture. But when he spoke about that memory, every word arrived naturally, without searching. The customer service employee behind the counter suddenly looked up from her computer for the first time. Her eyes locked onto Arthur with unmistakable recognition before she quickly looked away. Marcus noticed. So did no one else. She reached beneath the counter, picked up her cell phone, and typed a short message without saying a word. Arthur continued speaking into the phone. "I tried writing. Every letter came back." Elena answered almost immediately. "That is impossible. Nothing has been possible for a long time." Marcus quietly asked, "Ma'am, do you know this man?" She did not answer the question directly. Instead, she asked one of her own. "Mr. Reed, what does he look like right now?" Marcus refused to exaggerate. "He is cold. His coat is soaked. His hands are shaking. He seems tired, but he knows exactly why he called you." "Does he appear frightened?" Marcus glanced at Arthur, who still held the paper like it was the last piece of his life that nobody had managed to take away.
"No," Marcus replied.
"He looks hopeful." Those words seemed to strike Elena harder than anything else. Hopeful. Not angry. Not confused. Hopeful. She lowered her voice until it was almost a whisper. "Mr. Reed, please do not tell him who I am yet." "I have not." "Thank you." Marcus nodded even though she could not see him. Behind the counter, the employee finished typing and slipped her phone into her pocket. Less than 20 seconds later, a dark gray passenger van turned slowly into the station entrance. It carried the polished blue logo of Havenbridge Senior Outreach across both front doors. The security officer relaxed the instant he saw it. "There," he said confidently. "His people are here." Marcus looked from the approaching van to the frightened expression that briefly crossed the employee's face before she forced herself to smile. Something about the timing felt too perfect. Then the van door opened, and a sharply dressed man stepped into the rain, already calling out before anyone had introduced the old man. "Arthur Vale," he said warmly. "We have been looking everywhere for you." The man stepped out of the gray van as though he belonged everywhere he went. His navy overcoat was untouched by the rain. His shoes barely splashed the wet pavement, and the warm smile on his face seemed carefully practiced. "Arthur Vale," he called again, opening both hands as if greeting an old friend. "There you are. We have all been worried sick." Arthur tightened his grip on the little folded paper instead of walking toward him. Marcus noticed that tiny movement immediately. People often trusted their mouths before their instincts, but frightened hands rarely lied. The security officer nodded with visible relief. "Glad you found him. We have had quite a situation here." The newcomer offered a polite handshake. "Daniel Cross, Havenbridge Senior Outreach. Arthur has been under our care for some time. Thank you all for looking after him." His voice was smooth enough to calm almost anyone. Almost. Marcus remained still. The phone was still connected. Elena had not hung up. She had not said a single word since Daniel arrived. She was listening. Daniel looked at Marcus with a professional smile. "You must be Mr. Reed. Thank you for your kindness. I know this has been inconvenient." He reached inside his coat and removed a leather folder. "Arthur sometimes becomes confused. We appreciate people who help, but we can take over from here." He unfolded several official-looking documents with logos, signatures, identification numbers, and a photograph of Arthur attached to one page. Everything appeared organized. Everything appeared legitimate. Daniel gently continued. "Arthur has episodes where he believes family members are waiting for him. Unfortunately, there are no surviving relatives. It can be very distressing." Arthur slowly shook his head. "That is not true," Daniel answered with the same patient tone a nurse might use with someone recovering from illness. "I know this feels real to you." Marcus studied the papers instead of the words. Years of making deliveries had trained him to notice details that most people ignored. Addresses, dates, timestamps, tracking numbers. Tiny mistakes that could send an entire shipment to the wrong city. His eyes paused on one printed form, then another. Something felt slightly out of place. Daniel turned toward Marcus again. "If your delivery schedule has been interrupted, Havenbridge would be happy to compensate you for your time." Marcus did not reach for the offered business card. "I am not worried about the money." Daniel smiled a little wider. "Then allow us to handle Arthur." Marcus answered quietly. "He is still speaking with someone." Daniel glanced toward the phone for the first time. "Who?" Before Marcus could answer, Elena finally spoke through the speaker. Her voice remained calm, but every word landed with unusual precision. "Mr. Cross, is that your name?" Daniel froze for only the smallest fraction of a second before recovering. "Yes, ma'am." "How long has Arthur been under your organization's care?" "Approximately 6 years." Marcus looked at Arthur. The old man lowered his eyes. Daniel continued smoothly. "We have done everything possible to provide stability." Elena asked another question. "Then why was I informed that my father died 6 years ago?" No one moved. Daniel blinked once before replying. "I believe there has been some misunderstanding." "There is either a misunderstanding," Elena replied, "or someone filed very serious paperwork." Rain tapped steadily against the roof above them. The station grew strangely quiet as nearby passengers realized this conversation was no ordinary misunderstanding. Daniel shifted the folder in his hands. "Ma'am, perhaps we should continue this privately."
No, Elena answered.
"Not yet." Marcus looked back at the documents. One line caught his attention. The transportation authorization listed today's pickup time as 2 o'clock that afternoon. Marcus frowned. Arthur had been sitting beneath the station awning well before 1 o'clock. Marcus himself had delivered groceries across the street at 12:48 and remembered seeing the old man standing alone even then. He spoke without accusation. "Mr. Cross, your paperwork says Arthur left your facility at 2 o'clock. That is correct. Then how was he already here before 1? Daniel's smile faded for the first time. Only slightly. Perhaps you are mistaken about the time. Marcus shook his head. My delivery application records every stop. I checked in across the street before 1. Arthur was already here. Daniel answered immediately. Delivery applications are not always accurate. Marcus nodded slowly. Sometimes they are not. He pointed gently toward the authorization sheet. Neither are forms printed before something actually happens. Daniel looked down almost instinctively. The printing timestamp in the lower corner had been overlooked. It showed the document had been generated hours before the reported pickup time. Nobody spoke. Even the security officer leaned closer to read the page for himself. Then Elena's quiet voice returned through the speaker. Mr. Reed, she said. Please do not let anyone take that piece of paper Arthur is holding until I know exactly what is happening. At that exact moment, Daniel's eyes shifted away from Marcus and settled on the faded note with the tiny swallow drawn beside Elena's name. It was the first time since arriving that the careful smile disappeared completely. Daniel recovered almost instantly. The smile returned to his face with the confidence of someone accustomed to difficult questions. There is a simple explanation, he said. Administrative systems are not perfect. Dates can be entered incorrectly. Records can overlap. I assure everyone here that Arthur is safe under our care. Arthur lowered his eyes. If I was safe, he asked quietly, why did I have to keep hiding this? He lifted the damp piece of paper only an inch before folding it tightly against his chest again. Daniel's attention followed the movement for barely a second, but Marcus noticed it. It was the first thing Daniel had looked at without smiling. Elena noticed it too. Her voice came through the speaker, steady and thoughtful. Mr. Reed. Yes, ma'am. Can you see both sides of the paper? Marcus carefully answered. Not without unfolding it more. Please ask Arthur if he is comfortable letting you look. Marcus did not reach for the note. Instead, he turned toward Arthur. It is your decision. Arthur studied Marcus for a long moment. Kindness had followed him all afternoon without demanding anything in return. Slowly, he nodded and placed the fragile paper into Marcus's hand. The edges had nearly worn away from years of careful folding. Marcus handled it as gently as if it were an old family photograph. Rainwater had blurred most of the ink, but the name Elena and the tiny swallow were still visible. He tilted the paper beneath the bright station lights. Something faint appeared near one corner. There are numbers written along the edge, Marcus said. Very small numbers. Elena immediately became alert. Read them exactly as you see them. Marcus slowly read each digit. Silence answered him for several seconds. Then Elena spoke again, but this time she was not speaking to anyone at the station. Maya, she said to someone beside her. Search every archived medical record connected to those numbers. Do not search his name. Search only the code. Daniel's calm expression barely changed, but one finger tightened against the leather folder in his hand. Ma'am, he interrupted politely. Those markings probably mean nothing. Arthur writes random notes on anything he finds. Arthur looked directly at him. I did not write those. Marcus turned the paper over once more. A strip of old transparent tape covered part of the corner. Beneath it, barely visible, was the faded outline of a blue circular stamp. It was almost completely erased by time. Marcus narrowed his eyes. There is part of a seal underneath the tape. Daniel answered too quickly. Many shelters stamp donated materials. Marcus did not argue. He simply looked at the customer service employee. Her face had quietly lost all color. She recognized the seal before Marcus could identify it. She immediately looked down at her keyboard again. Elena heard the hesitation in everyone's silence. Mr. Reed, describe it. Only part of it remains. I can see the letters H and A, and maybe the edge of a circle. Another pause. Then Elena inhaled sharply. Haven Bridge. Daniel spoke before anyone else could. That could describe dozens of organizations. Elena ignored him. Maya, compare the code and the partial seal with every Havenbridge patient archive immediately. Marcus carefully slid the note into the clear plastic sleeve that had held one of his delivery receipts. The rain will destroy it if we leave it exposed. Daniel took one small step forward. Thank you. I will preserve it with Arthur's records. Marcus calmly shook his head. Arthur trusted me with it. That document belongs with his file. Marcus looked at Arthur instead of Daniel. Who do you want to keep it? Arthur answered without hesitation. Him. The security officer shifted uneasily. Until that moment, he had assumed Daniel was simply completing routine work. Now he noticed something else. Daniel had not once asked Arthur whether he was hurt, hungry, or cold. Every question had been about paperwork. Every glance had been toward the folded note. A soft voice came from the parked sedan near the curb. Daddy. Marcus turned. Little Nia had cracked the window just enough for her voice to reach him. Are you okay? Marcus smiled gently. I am fine, sweetheart. Stay inside. I will be there soon. She nodded without another question and closed the window again. Arthur watched the exchange with tired eyes. You stay with your little girl, he whispered. You already helped enough. Marcus smiled. Sometimes 1 minute becomes longer than we planned. At that exact moment, Elena returned to the call. Her voice sounded different now. It no longer carried only doubt. It carried recognition. Mr. Reed, she said quietly. Those numbers are not random. They match an active Havenbridge patient identification code. But according to the records I was given years ago, Arthur Vale was declared deceased. Someone created 2 completely different histories for the same man. And I think that little piece of paper is the first proof that both stories cannot be true. For the first time since Daniel arrived, no one seemed certain who was in control. The rain softened into a steady whisper across the roof of the terminal, but the silence beneath it grew heavier with every passing second. Daniel carefully closed the leather folder in his hands as though nothing important had happened. I understand why everyone is concerned, he said with practiced warmth. The easiest thing would be for Arthur to come back with us. Once he is comfortable, we can answer every question through the proper channels. Arthur slowly shook his head. Every time someone said proper channels, I woke up somewhere else. Marcus watched Daniel instead of interrupting him. He noticed that Daniel never denied the conflicting records. He only kept redirecting everyone toward leaving the station. Elena noticed the same pattern. Mr. Cross, she asked through the speaker, does Arthur have the legal right to refuse leaving with your organization? Daniel answered without hesitation. Arthur sometimes struggles to make safe decisions. That was not my question. Another brief pause followed. His care requires professional judgment. Marcus looked toward the security officer. Does he have any court order with him? The officer blinked. I have not seen one. Daniel immediately reached into his folder again. Those documents are handled electronically now. Marcus nodded politely. Then someone can verify them electronically before Arthur goes anywhere. Daniel smiled again, but this time it seemed slightly thinner. Verification takes time. So does the truth, Marcus replied. Inside the parked sedan, Nia quietly watched through the windshield. She saw her father standing beside the old man without raising his voice once. She had seen that look before. It was the same expression he wore whenever someone blamed the wrong delivery driver for a missing package. Marcus never argued first. He always checked the facts. Arthur slowly slipped one hand inside his worn coat. Daniel took an instinctive step forward. Arthur, let me help you.
No.
Arthur's answer was soft but certain. His fingers disappeared beneath the torn lining of the coat for several seconds before he pulled out something so small that almost nobody noticed it at first. It was an old brass key attached to a faded paper tag protected beneath clear tape. The tag was yellow with age. Marcus accepted it only after Arthur nodded permission. There is writing on it, Marcus said. He held it beneath the station lights. The ink had nearly vanished, but one line remained readable. Locker 214, Central Bus Terminal. Daniel's face remained composed, yet his breathing changed almost imperceptibly. Elena spoke immediately. Mr. Reed, Where are you standing? Marcus glanced around the station. Near Gate 7. Is there still a public locker area? The security officer answered before Marcus could. Yes, down the east hallway. Most of them are still in service. Arthur looked at Marcus with tired eyes. I hid things where they could not move them. Daniel stepped forward with another reassuring smile. Arthur has hidden random belongings for years. Unfortunately, that behavior is common. Marcus looked at the old brass key once more. The paper tag was old, but not random. A tiny date had been stamped across one corner. 6 years earlier. Exactly the same year Arthur had supposedly died. Elena's breathing grew noticeably slower. She was thinking, not reacting. Mr. Reed, she said carefully. Would Arthur be willing to check that locker? Marcus turned toward Arthur instead of answering for him. Would you like to? Arthur stared at the key for a long moment before whispering. If it is still there. Maybe she will finally know I never stopped writing. Daniel spoke quickly. There is no reason to waste everyone's time. Those lockers are cleaned regularly. The security officer frowned. Actually, long-term lockers stay active if rental fees continue to be paid. Daniel looked toward him, surprised for the first time. Marcus noticed another detail. Daniel knew exactly which hallway led to the lockers before anyone mentioned it. He had already glanced in that direction twice. Marcus quietly slipped the key and the folded paper into the clear plastic receipt sleeve and sealed it shut. If there is nothing in the locker, he said calmly, we lose a few minutes. He looked directly at Daniel. But if there is something inside, nobody should decide what it means before we see it. Arthur nodded. Elena remained silent for several seconds before saying one final sentence that changed the atmosphere once again. Mr. Reed, my legal team is already on the way. Until they arrive, please make sure no one opens that locker without independent witnesses. If someone spent 6 years hiding the truth, I do not want the truth disappearing 5 minutes before we find it. No one hurried toward the locker. That surprised Marcus more than anything else. People rushed toward conclusions every day, but real evidence deserved patience. The security officer looked down the long east hallway where rows of aging metal lockers stood beneath bright fluorescent lights. If we are doing this, he said, we are doing it correctly. I will witness the opening. Daniel gave a polite nod that almost looked supportive. That is exactly what we want. Transparency protects everyone. His words sounded reasonable, yet Marcus noticed that Daniel kept checking his watch instead of the locker key. It was as though he was waiting for something besides the truth. Marcus slipped his phone into his jacket pocket but kept the speaker on. Elena remained connected without interrupting. Somewhere hundreds of miles away, she was listening to every footstep inside a bus station she had probably never imagined would change her life. Arthur walked slowly beside Marcus. His breathing was steady, but every few steps he glanced toward the key in Marcus's hand. I used to come here every month, he whispered. Sometimes I remembered why. Sometimes I only remembered that I had promised myself not to lose the key. Marcus looked at him. Did anyone know about the locker? Arthur searched his memory. I never told the people who moved me. He paused. I only told myself. Those words settled quietly inside Marcus's mind. Memory could fade, but promises made to protect someone else often survived much longer. They reached the locker corridor. Most of the metal doors showed scratches from decades of use. Some carried faded rental stickers. Others had fresh electronic locks. Locker 214 stood near the end of the row, older than the rest, its brass lock darkened with age. The security officer checked the locker number against the tag attached to the key. They matched perfectly. Daniel folded his arms. There is a strong possibility it was emptied years ago. Marcus simply inserted the key. It resisted at first, then turned with a heavy click that echoed down the quiet hallway. Everyone seemed to stop breathing again. Marcus slowly opened the narrow metal door. Inside sat a small weathered storage box, a plain brown envelope wrapped in clear plastic, and a compact digital voice recorder with dead batteries resting on top. Nothing more, nothing less. Arthur stared into the locker with tears gathering quietly in his eyes. "It is still here," he whispered. "I thought they would find it." Daniel stepped forward immediately. "Those items should be handled by our organization to preserve the chain of custody." Before Marcus could answer, the security officer gently raised one hand. "Nobody touches anything until we document what is inside." Marcus appreciated the calm professionalism. He took out his phone and photographed the unopened arrangement exactly as it appeared inside the locker. Elena spoke softly through the speaker. "Thank you." Daniel forced another smile. "Photographs are fine, but old belongings rarely prove anything." Marcus carefully lifted the plastic-wrapped envelope first. The paper inside remained perfectly dry despite the passing years. On the front, written in Arthur's unmistakably careful handwriting, were only 6 words. "If Elena ever calls, trust Marcus." Marcus froze. He had never met Arthur before that rainy evening. There was no possible way the old man could have written his name years earlier. Arthur looked equally confused. "That is not what I wrote," he said quietly. Marcus turned the envelope over. Beneath the clear plastic, another smaller note had been taped to the back. The ink was faded almost beyond recognition. He peeled back the protective sleeve just enough to read the original words hidden underneath. "If Elena